Boom. According to that, I am live. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko Simon. It's good to see so many people here already in the chat. Yeah, hope everyone's doing good. We've just had rainy season start here in Tokyo and throughout most of Japan. So it's been a bit of a gloomy week, although we had a lovely day today. But yeah, basically the next 3 or 4 weeks, the weather's going to be sort of dark and dreary and terrible. And it's going to make you think, oh, I wish it was sunny again. And then summer will start and you'll think, oh, I wish it was rainy season again. So it's that time of year. However, all of that said, I am going to be away next Sunday. I'm going to be flying to Singapore Sunday, so I will be on an airplane. I won't be able to do the show. So I'll be taking, I guess, a week off, and the week after that, I'll actually be sort of voluntarily for the family self-isolating in a hotel. Although, you know what, I'll probably come home actually on Sunday. So yeah, I guess the Sunday after that, come think of it, I will be around. So yeah, the trip to Korea, of course, got cancelled, but this one so far is still going ahead. So I am looking forward to that. But yeah. How is everyone here doing? Good to see so many people already rocking in as always. As always, it's been just kind of busy and I haven't had a lot of topics, but I do have some good things to talk about. I mean, the big thing at the moment is that I've talked about the yen becoming cheap against the US dollar. Right now, a dollar buys. Normally, a dollar will only buy like 108, 107 yen, and right now it buys 134, which means that basically, if you're coming from, well, pretty much anywhere with US dollars right now, I know other currencies, I don't know how other currencies are vis a vis the US dollar, and if it's just that the US dollar is super strong. But if you're coming from the US to Japan right now, and I know one or two people that are, everything in Japan is literally on a 30% off sale, which I'm going to talk about in the topics. So that's one thing. Um, yeah. Great to see people rocking in. Let's check out who's in here. December Clouds is definitely ready for the 30% off sale. Of course, there are conditions apply, which you'll have to check out for. We've got Tudom. Great to see you, Tudom. Good to have you in here. Yeah, you'd rather not have a tour guide, says December Clouds. Well, I mean, seriously, if you have a tour guide, then, and everything's cheaper, why not? Kibros Tenshi, Sobros Tenshi, good to have you in here. You've got a coffee, you've got a cookie, you've got cookie dough, and it's Tokyo Tonight time. Well, and enjoy the cookie dough. I'm kind of jealous. Yeah, good to have you in here. Ada Void, good morning. Arizona, good to have you in here. One Johnson waving. One Johnson waving right back at you. Quinn Rankin, boom, good to have you in here. Andrea Morboy, hello all. School holidays soon in Australia. Phew, is that a relief? I guess if are you involved in teaching? Is that why? For most people, of course, having kids on holidays isn't a relief, but yeah. Andrew Mobile, we can all fly to Japan soon anyway and say hi to me. Yes, indeed. Public holiday in Australia tomorrow. Oh, enjoy that. Butter squirrels, their emojis also coming up. I don't know why they're getting censored. So yeah, euro is slightly stronger, gets you almost 150 yen. Okay, but is that changed? How much has that changed? Has that changed like about the same ratio, like from 180, 108 to 134? Like, is the current 150, was it like 120 before? Um, but yeah, in any case, it's good. But of course, it's a bit of a farce at the moment as to whether tourism's actually restarting. So that's something that I will put in there. Oh, you're a teacher. Sorry, I don't know how I didn't pick up on that properly before. Well, definitely enjoy the vacations and hope you get to go away somewhere, even if it's just within Australia. I mean, even within Australia, of course, it was dodgy for a long time where you could get trapped, not able to come back. I've got a friend at the moment who's traveling in America and just got the Rona, and that's going to interfere with trip plans to come back. Although interesting to see that America is actually dropping testing as an entry requirement. Um, yeah, it is kind of funny how far, again, and this is another thing I'm going to talk about, how, Japan is still definitely like it's not even pro or anti mask. Masks are just normal here. But, the idea that America is enthusiastically giving up masks and giving up testing, like, yeah, the liberalization is good. And I'm glad that there are companies pulling us along to go back to some kind of normal. But at the same time, I'm like, really? Are you okay with that? I mean, but I guess it's America. But thank you for leading the way on that stuff anyway. So wow, the euro was indeed 120 at the end of last year's Gerber's Techi. So there you go. Dan H, good to have Dan H in here as always. Always appreciate the links and topic suggestions that you share. And everyone else, remember as always, you can do what Andrew Moboy is doing there in Gerber's Tenchi. Just say my name, it flashes orange, and it will stand out to me. So when I go back and catch up comments, I will pay attention, particularly if you would like to say something to me or ask me something or ask me to talk about something. Just do what they're doing. They definitely have they have the idea there. Um, yeah, yeah. I guess we might as well jump in. 17 viewers, 14 viewers, 7 likes. Oh, we lost one. America is insane. Well, it can be good to be a little bit insane sometimes, but yeah. John Carlo Lanoy, good to have you in here. Thank you for saying hello. Thank you to, everyone. I do appreciate it when people remember to say hello, and I also appreciate it when people remember to like the video. I do appreciate that. Dan H has come across a new channel, which you think I'd like, called Allocators Asia. He's done videos on Lee Liu and Den Fujita. I don't know who either of those are, so I guess I should check it out. Allocators Allocators Asia. Sounds like a play on words for alligators. Yo, says Milchman too. Good to have you in here. Okay, I'm going to check that out. I'm tempted to check it out right now briefly, but that'll be too much of a squirrel chase, so I'll try to remember to come back to it later, but I do appreciate the tip. I've actually got I think the first topic I think I've got is Asianometry, which I think was your recommendation, Dan H, and I love that podcast so much. I watch it on YouTube, of course. That and a bunch of other things. I do appreciate the links that you share. And everybody else, of course. Remember, everybody, of course, I've been a little bit quiet on Twitter lately, like I say, partly just because I've been so busy with work. But if you ever want to catch up with me outside of outside of YouTube, I am pretty much always on Twitter and paying attention. I don't really do anything on Facebook. I do the odd little bit of silliness. I just pretty much use Instagram for my runs nowadays, just putting up my time as a photo. So yeah, Twitter's where to catch me if you want to catch me. And if anyone is in Singapore, I don't think I actually have any regular commenters who are based in Singapore, but anyone who wants to catch up week after next, I'll be around. So hit me up if you've got that. Andrea doesn't tweet, but that's okay. I personally have gone just over time. I've gone off Facebook a little bit, but I still keep it going. Dan H, I'm sure I will have to pay a higher price due to inflation, like BOJ's Haruhiko Kuroda said. When you say I'll have to pay the higher price have I already missed something there? Certainly going to Singapore, everything is going to be expensive. So yes, there will be a 30% surcharge fund tax on everything. But that's good. I'm trying to stay healthy at the moment. I should comment quickly on that. I started the pandemic at 88 kilos. I'm right now at 74. And I finally got my metabolic syndrome waist. In Japan, 85 centimeters or above for men is metabolic syndrome, regardless of how healthy you are or how good your weight is or your BMI or anything like that. If you have 85 centimeter waist, you are diagnosed metabolic syndrome and you are given diet counseling on every Kenko Shindan. And I was like 95 at the start of the pandemic. And I sort of got it down to like 88, but then I never got anything else sort of done. But lately I am at 85.1 and 85.2. I'm like millimeters to go. So, I'm kind of stoked with that. But I'm about to go away to Singapore, and what always happens on overseas trips is you start exercising and you eat too much and drink, and it's going to set me back like ages. And I'm not going to want to do my Kenko Shindan after my health checkup. But we'll figure it out. I am thinking I might go for a couple of runs when I'm there. I'm going to try my best not to let it slip too much. Andrea Morboy, it will be fun. You have an online student who lives in Singapore. They're originally from Australia. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, actually, there's a lot of Aussies in Singapore, and it's a great place to live. I lived there as a kid. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll tell you what, I think we've gone through the greetings and the general update. So let's dive into the topics. So the first topic that I have, as you know, if I go onto the actual video, it will start playing. But I have to recommend once again Unseen Japan. I'm a big fan. Noah Oskar, I think, is the name of the person who runs it. I've never met him, but I'm hoping again when things return to normal and we get to do things like tweet ups in Tokyo. I'd love to actually meet the dude. He makes excellent stuff. His blog. When it popped up, I think a lot of people didn't like the social justice warrior sort of aspects of it. But, the way that I see it, he's just trying to, get all the information and be considerate towards people. That's really when he's taking on social issues and so on. I appreciate that he approaches everything from a perspective of getting as much information as possible, and sharing all the sort of voices and not being put off by people saying, oh, you're being woke and stuff like that. Which I really do like the blog, even though I've seen sort of more conservative, veteran Japan types being a little bit dismissive. He puts a lot of work into the stuff that he does, and this video is another example. The series that he did on the Japan Red Army, and I think everybody's read and heard something about the Japan Red Army, but I already talked about the way that he put. There's so much information, but the way that he took all the information that was available and from Japanese sources, and he put it into such a compelling narrative in the video series that he did on that. And I thought I knew about the Japan Red Army, and he showed me that I did, but he added a ton of stuff I didn't know, and it was a great series. And he's taken a lot of time preparing the next video that he's made, and it's the near assassination of Tsar Nicholas II as a crown prince at the time before he was Tsar in Japan. Again, it's an excellent video. People know the story, or a lot of people know the story of the Otsu incident, where the crown prince of Russia was nearly killed while he was doing a tour of Japan before he went on to become the Tsar of Russia, who indeed the Tsar of Russia who invaded Japan or attacked Japan and then lost the Russo-Japanese War. So he really had a pretty poor track record against Japan, you could say. But yeah, I'd heard the story, and I'd heard bits and pieces of the story. He put it together so well. It's such a great video. And when you consider the context and the ramifications, I mean, first of all, at the time, Tsar Nicholas was like super young. In fact, now I can't remember, but he was like 16 or something, or maybe a bit older than that. But he'd been sent away by the Tsar to sort of get him to mature and get used to sort of playing the role of being a sort of a traveling statesman. But at the same time, while he was in Nagasaki, he got a dragon tattoo on his arm, even though tattoos were already like illegal in Japanese society while he was sort of down there. But he managed to get one done. And he, by all means, had a great tour, all until he ran into a sort of a fanatic anti-foreigner police officer who, attacked him with a sword. And, again, hearing the national outcry and reaction against the attempted would-be assassin, hearing about how Meiji traveled from Tokyo, which again was something that was kind of unthinkable, and the fact that the assassin did this out of a motivation to sort of for perceived slights by foreigners towards Japan and the unequal treaties, including with Russia, and yet this incident, which this assassin did, prompted the emperor to, for the first time, go and meet a foreign, not a tsar, but just a foreign dignitary, caused him to travel from Tokyo to Kyoto, I believe, where he met up, where he was convalescing after, which in itself was a huge concession. Also fascinating to hear the consequences, for example, how the government ordered the assassin to death, but the newly independent judiciary in Japan thought that it would assert itself and say, well, no, technically the laws, and I don't know if this was codified the same back then, but under the rules today, there's no hard rule around this, but the general guideline is that you cannot get the death penalty for murder in Japan unless you murder multiple people. So the idea that for an attempted assassination of a statesman, the death penalty is not available. And although the government ordered the death penalty, the courts in Japan actually overruled the sentence and sentenced the would-be assassin to life. However, this also marked kind of the rise of courts opposing the government, which led to similar. Whenever someone assassinated somebody, they said that they were doing it for love of the empire, and it led to a bunch of coup leaders and fanatics getting away with doing similar incidents, which of course took Japan all the way up to World War II. All of this is sort of covered in detail and how it all strings together, but the full story and just the narrative of how it happened. And when you think that, Tsar Nicholas, and by all accounts, he was still cool with everything when he left Japan, but and had a great impression and hit it off well with Meiji in spite of this one single incident. But yeah, you have to think later on, he did express racist views towards Japan later in life, and indeed declared war on Japan. And the consequences of that lead up to this day. I mean, the whole idea of the sort of blitzkrieg of Japan just after the nuclear bombings in World War II was partly Russia trying to correct the loss of territory that had occurred under Tsar Nicholas when he, fought a war against Japan and lost. So Excellent, excellent video. Fascinating bit of history. Really, really well done. I mean, I can't give enough credit to Unseen Japan on how much obvious effort they put into these videos. You always, when someone puts together like a 30 to 50-minute video on YouTube, and you can tell they've spent months on it sometimes, you can tell how much time they've spent on it for a video that, you digest and think, oh, that was good. Now I'm going to watch cats fight. Um, no, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to watch a hamster spinning in a wheel as my next video. Oh, I'm going to like that one. It's a thankless thing. Too often on YouTube, people, when they do passion projects or whatever, the videos are not given the appreciation they deserve. And this video is really, really well done. So highly recommended. Second video that I recommend, and it's about to start playing, so I will turn it off, but it is the Asianometry video recommended previously by Dan H. It's a great channel where he does a lot of uh, uh, history and explaining of sort of the high tech and semiconductor world. But he tells the story of how Japan got started in semiconductors and how it became the sort of world power in semiconductors, which it really was until, at least in pure semiconductors, i.e., the components which go into memory and computer, chips and so on, rather than the actual, sort of further on end products, until it got overtaken by Korea and, of course, presently by Taiwan. For about 40 years, really, from the 1950s to the 1990s, this was sort of the backbone of Japan's economy. And yeah, again, elements of the story here, just great history. During GHQ, somebody for some reason like dropped the confidential like national state secret plans for the integrated circuit chip, which America sort of was trying to figure out what to do with after the Bell Labs had invented it in 1947, which is memorable because it was, in fact, it was 1948 that it was patented, but memorable because it was a few months after the Roswell incident, which some people say that proves they got it from aliens. But yeah, this was like revolutionary, of course, the integrated circuit, and how this enabled Sony to develop transistor radios and transistors, and later how it caused Japan to develop semiconductors. But the way that Japan was able to get the technology from America, the way it was able to develop and innovate with the technology, and how it went from following and always being a generation behind America on semiconductors to sort of doing what it does well, to study and learn and improve on processes, and soon doing better than America. And of course, soon the same thing happened to Japan that Japan did to America, with Korea and then later Taiwan doing the same thing. Again, it's kind of, sort of, there's the whole history of Japan, of post-war Japan and the economy that draws us all here and so on. It's from the story, and again, it's a fairly not overly long. I think 11 minutes, and it puts together a really important story really well. So again, if you're into two really great videos just for making your brain just work a little bit better. Yeah, these two videos highly recommended: Unseen Japan and Asianometry, both of which I've recommended before, and I'm recommending again now. Into the comments. There aren't that many comments actually. Cobra Senshi, you don't have enough money to buy as much food as you'd need to lose weight. Oh, that's yeah. I think I know what you mean there. That's right. Cheaper food is often actually less healthy and more fattening. Yeah, that's that is a thing. That is a phenomenon. Odie Jr., late bada boom. Great to have you with us. No worries at all. Great to see you there in the comments. I'm going to move on. Interesting time at the moment where, on the one hand, you've had the cabinet. I talked a couple of weeks ago about how Japan. Oh, you know what? Before I move on, I see Cobra Senshi actually raised an interesting thing, which I do not have in the comments, but worth raising, actually. Technically speaking, aren't we all aliens, at least according to one theory as to how life arrived on Earth via an asteroid? Panspermia, I believe that you're talking about. And I don't know if you're talking specifically about the news about the Hayabusa 2 samples from the asteroid Ryugu, but basically, that's a thing. In fact, I should have included that here in my links, and I don't have it, but let me talk about it briefly. So, of course, there is still the fact that we haven't found life or even signs of life anywhere other than Earth. Although there's some argument that it's been found on Mars already by the Viking probes. In fact, compelling evidence, and it's kind of funny to me that the follow-up probes haven't tried to do the same sort of experiments that Viking did, which were intended to detect life. But it still seems to me inevitable that we're probably going to find bacteria, some sort of bacterial life, probably all over the place in the solar system. But for now, yeah, we have these asteroids in the solar system, And there was this idea that, in the start of the solar system, I mean, Earth itself was formed by a Mars-sized object crashing in and, into the old Earth and sort of blowing up and creating the moon and doing all sorts of stuff. So, stuff was sort of bouncing all over the solar system in the beginning. And there was this idea: was it only on Japan that that life formed, or were there were the ingredients, or was already fully formed life? I think they've had tardigrades, those little um, what do they call them? Water monkeys, that you can get. Those things have survived like in orbit, like in the vacuum of space for prolonged periods of time when they've checked on the space station. So that's one theory. But a better theory that actually came up in big Japan news. It's kind of funny. You realize that, we have taken samples back from the moon, but we've never received samples from like any other part of the solar system, not from Mars, not from Venus. We've lately just succeeded for the first time getting actual physical samples from asteroids. And the very first country to be able to do that was Japan with the Hayabusa 1, where they only got a few grains. It didn't work as well as they wanted to. But in Hayabusa 2, they hit the jackpot. They got a huge scoop of sort of dirt from this very, very small asteroid Ryugu, and it came back to Earth, and they analyzed it, and they found like 20 different types of amino acids. And these amino acids are basically not life, but they are considered like the essential from these sort of acids. Apparently, is how you get RNA that it can evolve into DNA. And so it's thought that, hey, well, if these asteroids are full of the complex organic acids that basically allow RNA and sort of life genetic material to form, it's entirely possible that yes, indeed, Japan has just possibly discovered the origin of life on Earth, or at least something that points to the possibility that asteroids falling onto Earth full of these amino acids could have done it. Of course, no one knows if that's actually the case, but the fact that we're finding these sort of building blocks to life, like all over these materials on this asteroid, is just crazy. So yeah, greetings and salutations, Steve Miller. Great to have you in here. Dan H, new capitalism agenda or update pension funds to invest more in startups. Yeah, that seems kind of crazy to me. More air thrown out by Kishida without explanation on how it will be done or solving problems like lack of talent. Yeah, Kishida, well, like I said, Kishida doesn't actually have ideas. He's more slogans than actual ideas, which makes an interesting contrast to a guy that I'm going to be talking about later on in the show today, Suga, who actually is terrible at PR, but actually had pretty decent policies. I find I almost feel like scoffing. It's not that they're wrong that the government talking about supporting, wanting to encourage Japanese to invest more in the economy and, kickstarting the economy with spending and with, investing in startups and stuff like that. But when I first came to Japan in the 1990s, they would still turn off the ATMs at 3 p.m. And the reason that they would turn off the ATMs at 3 p.m. was that until the late 1990s, the whole, Japanese economy was based on the opposite premise. It was based on the idea of getting Japanese. There was, of course, wage inflation until the early 1990s, and this was still carrying on. They didn't know what to do at the time, but basically until the end of the bubble, the idea of that drove the economy was that to give people lots of cash, to have them put all of their cash into their bank accounts, and to encourage people to never take it out. And basically, the cash richness of Japanese banks was used for basically as domestic loans to fund public works, and it was basically the liquidity of the Japanese banks, which was built on Japanese having so much savings in the banks, particularly in the post office, that drove the entire sort of, quasi-government, quasi-private sort of public works spending that sort of caused the whole cycle of development of the Japanese economy. So the Japanese, Ministry of Finance used to have rules that banks would have to pay more taxes if they did things that would make it easier for people to take their money out. So they would basically impose taxes and penalties on banks if they left their ATM machines on past 3 p.m. So banks would have to decide the trade-off. Do they want to attract customers and make more fees from ATM fees by leaving their machines on, or do they want to make money by paying less taxes by just staying a big piggy bank that no one can get the money out of? And it's kind of funny, the flip from that age of like pathologically trying to stop Japanese from being able to take out money and use it, to now saying, oh, you should take your money out of your savings and spend on startups. which the pension fund already has done a bunch of dodgy investments, and there have been some severe performance issues because of that. And a lot of people questioning whether the governance around the investment decisions of the government pension fund itself, whether there were sufficient safeguards. And yet they're practically inviting the country now to go to the casino, which are like, yes, the old policy was wrong, and it's good that they're counterbalancing, but I feel like they're not doing either way. But yeah, Dan H, you missed 2 of my squirrel highlighted messages. I'm going back up. Oh, let me thank you for flagging that. Den Fujita is the man who pretty much founded McDonald's Japan. In fact, I'm going to go further back up. Okay. Thank you for pointing that out, Dan H. So going back properly, Den Fujita is the man who pretty much founded McDonald's Japan and made it successful. And Li Liu is the stockbroker who was a student leader in Tiananmen Square, is very well liked by Buffett. Okay, those sound like 2 very, very interesting people. McDonald's in Japan is a fascinating case study, actually, so that's very worthwhile. There's a great series on YouTube if you want to know about the Tiananmen Square massacre. There's a great document called, I believe, the Heavenly Gate, literally Tiananmen, and it's basically, rather than being like a history documentary, it's an aggregation of video from the time and from people within the movement. I think there are some people from the movement talking afterwards, but you can sort of just see how chaotic it was. It was basically a bunch of, confused, energetic students who really weren't sure what they were doing, and a panicking Chinese government. And there's a fantastic documentary you should really watch, especially given how the Chinese government's trying so hard to erase this now in Hong Kong as well. Really worth watching, but would be fascinated to hear about Li Liu. And in Fujita, that also sounds like, thank you for explaining, that sounds like a great story. Also great to see that war on drugs in the Philippines are very effective to our country, says Giancarlo Lanoy. That's an interesting, of course, over here it's drawn a lot of attention in international media for being a bit too heavy-handed, but also it's well known that it's very well supported popularly, so that's fascinating. Sainted Sir, great to see you. Believe in yourself. Good to see that you're here, and indeed good to be sidetracking you. And thank Dan H for making me scroll back up again properly, so I do appreciate that. And catching up. So yeah, Kerberos Tenchi, tardigrades are awesome. They are indeed. I think I said hello to Steve Miller. I commented there. Thank you for catching me up there, Dan H. Also, Eric Bailey, great to see. And yeah, I think I'm caught up. So I'm going to go on to the next topic. So the next topic is, as Japan is getting sort of trying to figure out how to get back to normal, and there's this fascinating sort of contradiction happening at the moment. On the one hand, the cabinet minister, I think I said on the show like 2 weeks ago, was doing press conferences telling everybody, yeah, the scientific rationale for masks everywhere doesn't really make sense. And clearly they were thinking about the upcoming summer about to hit Japan, and the effects of heat stress and so on people, and just the unpleasantness of wearing masks when it's like 90% humidity and 35 degrees Celsius, like 95 Fahrenheit or whatever it is, like we have all summer here. So they were starting to talk down the idea of not wearing masks everywhere, which isn't a rule anyway. It's like a social convention in Japan. It's like wearing a t-shirt, it's sort of like there's no rule. Maybe there are rules in some places, but generally there aren't rules that say you have to wear a t-shirt. You can't just walk around without a t-shirt, but a lot of people are going to judge you if you do walk around like that. And you could say, well, it's scientific that it's better to walk around without a t-shirt, but people are still going to judge you not based on how right you are. They're going to judge you based on how you're not doing the normal thing and how you're, sort of imposing yourself. And indeed, the Tokyo governor, as I mentioned at the time, said, "What you talking about, Willis?" to the government. But clearly, they seem to be pushing for a bit of a loosening of the kind of strict sort of social restrictions that were happening around COVID-19. However, with tours of foreigners starting to come back to Japan, and it's such a lie that it's got the BBC and the NHK is covering this, saying that Japan is resuming tourism just like other countries that resume tourism, which it is not. Japan is like North Korean style tourism right now. You have to have basically a minder with you. They have to be escorted tours, and those tours need to be ensuring that people are following strict rules, that people have to be wearing masks. And indeed, as I said the other week, it became a topic in Parliament that, are we going to make sure that they wear masks? So it's true and it's fair. I don't think it's necessarily prejudice to worry that a lot of people coming from countries which are not wearing masks so much anymore are likely to come to Japan and not follow the social norms and are going to self-righteously feel like it's fine not to wear masks, especially if there are no rules saying that you have to wear masks. But now we've got a situation where the very limited tourism that's allowed and the very strict rules that apply to those tourists are actually imposing stricter rules on the tourists than apply to Japanese people. And remember, there are some, a very small percentage still where I am, but there are still many Japanese who are anti-mask. There's basically, I think there was an account which, again, Unseen Japan mentioned that in an election there were anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers who ran for political office and got like 0.15% of the vote, but they exist. They're noisy, they draw attention, they have no relevance in Japan. But a Yomiuri survey found that of the population, 41% of people want to continue wearing masks regardless. 49% of people, majority, well, at least the largest percentage here, said that, I want to keep wearing a mask where it's necessary, but 41% of people want to keep wearing masks regardless. And only 9% of people say they want to wear masks as little as possible. So even taking from this, in a place like Tokyo with sort of the social conformity and the dirty looks that you'll get, that 9% are probably have been feeling pretty stressed out. But essentially, the 41%, 49 people are assuming that you need to wear it all the time. And those that aren't, if you're not wearing it for science reasons, you're wearing it for social conformity reasons, which can be pretty powerful in Tokyo, of course. So the result is that, you've still got a thing in Japan where a lot of people will say, continue. It feels like it's become a new social norm, like wearing a T-shirt, in any other city in the world. There'll always be a couple of people walking around without a T-shirt. But you're going to get some looks, and people are going to judge you for being like that. But there again, even on Twitter, I'm seeing a lot of people saying, "Well, I'm not wearing a mask anywhere, and I only got one dirty look, and I told them I'm right." And I don't doubt the problem's not whether you're right. The problem's really, again, it's like standing on the wrong side of the elevator. You're just annoying. And it maybe those people are wrong to be annoyed. And maybe you're right to not wear the mask and show everyone your example. But that's the way that things are here at the moment. And the particularly funny case, there's someone on Twitter talking about how, yes, they went to buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks, and the person gave them their cup, which had actually quite a cute message. They relayed it as saying, wear a freaking mask, Shiro's imperative form. You must wear a mask. But essentially, the way that they relate it is, wear a effing mask. Honestly, if I was told to wear a mask like this, but of course it made them feel mortified being having on the cup, being made to feel like they're being singled out for not wearing a mask. I say good job, Starbucks server person, for doing this, but this is going to become more of a point of social tension, I think, particularly in the summer, particularly with tourists returning. And remember, Team Foreigner, that unfortunately, where I am, there are very few foreigners, and yet of the people that I see not wearing masks, like 50%, more than 50% are foreigners. And we're talking like foreigners like 1 in 100 around here. And like basically, half of the foreigners I see walking around, and we're a small percentage in my neighborhood, but are the majority of people not wearing masks. And I'm like, dude, you're just making us all look bad. Just please stop. Just please, read the room, get a clue. That's what I feel like, even though I would love to not wear a mask, and it's getting miserable wearing masks, but at the same time, I really don't want, foreigners are not going to set the trend for this. I do think there'll be a bit of gaiatsu, there'll be a bit of foreign pressure, and I think that the Japanese government's acknowledging that. Maybe it's a good thing that they're restricting the tourism to try to ease people back into it, because there'll be a backlash against foreigners going around. But the thing is, these aren't tourists. These are people who live here, who just aren't being sheeple. But that's kind of not the point. Like I say, I'm sure in their mind they're being free thinkers. Not driven by the crowd. But that's kind of important in Japan, to read the room, and not doing that makes you look like an a-hole. And I'm not going to be the first to do that. I'm gonna let once the majority of people outside are not wearing them, because you know what? Even when it's a majority of Japanese stop wearing masks, foreigners are still going to be judged more than Japanese people for our behavior because we stand out more and we're lumped together more unfairly. And I hate being lumped together with people who are doing it on purpose and are doing it knowing that what they're doing. So yeah. Anyway, it is interesting. We have this. There is a social tension here. It really does feel to me like I honestly feel now like I'm not wearing trousers. I've stepped out of the house and gone 20 meters and realized, oh, I'm not. What is that? What is that funny thing I feel on my face? Oh, that's air. That's breeze. That doesn't feel right. I've got to go back. It literally feels like not wearing pants now. Not that I know what that feels like. But yeah, that moment, when you're feeling breeze where you don't normally feel breeze, it feels like that. So yeah, interesting times, and we'll come to the tourism thing as well. But I guess this is partly how Japan gets through this. Into the comments, Cobras Tenshi, no shoes, no shirt, no service might turn into no shoe. Well, that's literally what it kind of has been, and what I think it kind of is. I think you're exactly right, Cobras Tenshi. DJ Sunny Side Up, good night, good sir, good to see you. Cool kickboxing. Oh yeah, don't kick your. I will not kick your ass. Don't worry. Yeah. For it was actually there was a work like wellness day thing, and I decided to use that as my motivation to restart kickboxing, and so I went in and yeah, I'm in good physical shape, but I'm not in good kickboxing shape. I haven't been for more than a year, but it was fun to hit the pads. I got bruises all over my legs. But I also tried out the 360 camera with that, and it was really cool. The way that we got those shots, I asked somebody just to like, I was on a stick, and I said just point it roughly in the direction of where we're fighting, and I'll in editing, I can pick the shot. And yeah, the shot just comes out great. It looks like it's professional. Well, I mean, apart from the fact it's low resolution, it was fun to edit with the 360 camera, and it was fun to do kickboxing. Again, it's another thing that I stopped doing just out of with pandemic concerns. But you can't stop doing everything forever. But that said, kickboxing is super cardio intensive, and yet the whole thing doing with a mask and remembering you sweat a lot, so that mask becomes saturated and less permeable. So pretty uncomfortable. I mean, good exercise and fun. Also mindful about things like wearing the gloves and stuff like that. Yeah, it's probably. I mean, I should probably take my home gloves in and leave them in a locker in the gym actually. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to get back to, and I think combining it with the running's actually been great to get the old fitness up. So thank you for noticing, Nick. Good to see you. Over here in England, no one is wearing a mask anymore. I think it's the same in most countries now, frankly, and that's what, even as a foreigner, I'm kind of worried about with tourism restarting, that you have a lot of people coming over here and finding it weird that we are wearing masks here and not wanting to go with it, and then drawing the judgment from that. But that said, I mean, again, in Japan, it really does feel like people that the masking is not even like the health reasons anymore. Really, it really feels like it's just a social norm, and I wonder if that's the best thing. So yeah. So interesting that UK is going unmasked. Um, it's almost weird to wear a mask because then people think you're either unvaxxed or sick with COVID. Well, you know what? That's actually the dilemma around hay fever season as well, or people who wear masks. Like sometimes, if flu is going round, I would wear a mask. People wear masks sometimes to avoid getting flu from other people during flu season, while other people wear it because they have flu or a cold and they don't want to give it to other people. But it's always people, I guess, who are more sensitive anyway, who wear them either way. Um, you're probably right that it would draw attention that way, but still. So again, this is kind of why, isn't it better rather than have people being kind of picked on for wearing masks? Isn't it better to be picked on for not wearing masks, at least from a general overall safety perspective, especially if it's a norm? That's kind of where I've come around and where I'm okay wearing a mask, even if, even though I'd prefer not to, honestly, I'd prefer not to, but at the same time, I think overall it's better, and I'm okay to go along with it. So yeah, Aaron, great to see Aaron is with us here in the chat. Been out in your garden all morning, totally lost track of time. Oh, enjoy the garden. I'm jealous you have a garden. I've got I got a multi-story drop out my window. That's all that I've got. It's a lovely view, but Cobra Tenchi, maybe try one of those masks for breathing training for cyclists and runners. They do have filters. Actually, I've got a mask that I use for running. and it's quite thick, so it covers the mouth, but it's also thick enough that it leaves a bit of a space that air can come in like above the nose and so on. So it's okay. I've found a good solution for that. Project X01, good to have you in here. For some reason, it seems acceptable for people on bicycles not to wear masks. I've also seen a lot of people on bicycles not wearing masks. I guess they figure that you'll be there and gone so soon. But yeah, I think some people probably frown on that, but that is um, certainly I've noticed that in Tokyo. That very among the very few people I see not wearing masks. A lot of them are on bicycles, actually. Giancarlo, Illinois, we are celebrating 124th Independence Day in the Philippines. Congratulations, Philippines. Man, and just colonialists are just dicks. And you know what? I know that's 124th anniversary of independence from Spain, right? But I mean, then you've got America and Japan, and then America again. So I know that Philippines has had a rough history of being sort of colonized and abused by Western countries, but I'm really glad that Philippines is independent today, and congratulations on your Independence Day. That's pretty awesome. Aaron, did I miss the news about Japan letting tourists back in? Well, it just restarted, but of course we're going to come to this. You didn't miss it because yeah, they're letting people in, but of course they're in guided tours, and that is making people think, is this really the right way to do it? So Suga, not the BTS K-pop member, but the former Japanese prime minister. It was so funny when I said Suga's resigned, and I had a few people say, "What? Oh my god!" And then they were relieved to find out it was only the Japanese prime minister, not someone as important as what they were worried about. But yes, indeed. This is what I've been saying, that right now everything in Japan, the yen has gone from 108 to 134 and is still continuing to fall, i.e. the number is going up, the amount of yen you can get with the US dollar. Some people talking it might get to 140. I cashed out my US dollar savings at 128 and thought I did very well, and it's 134 right now. But yeah, that pretty much puts everything in Japan on a 30% sale right now. If you are coming here from a country that uses US dollars or basically has a currency that is basically not changed in relation to the US dollar, that means that you've basically got everything in Japan is 30% cheaper right now. And I know people have come here and they've experienced that and they're saying, wow, everything here is so cheap. And I was like, yeah, that's not normal. Normally everything sort of is equal at about 108. And some things are cheaper and some things are more expensive. But right now, Japan would be making so much money from tourism right now, if just based on the currency. The upside of having a weak yen, the two upsides are supposed to be that your exports are cheaper, and that's pointless now because, of course, Japan doesn't really make anything anymore. It pays for things to be made in China, which also is now more expensive. So Japan's exporting ability isn't as helped as it was when Japan was actually making its own stuff. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, of course, people coming into Japan have more spending power to spend money in Japan, but Japan is still effectively North Korea. Of course, you can come in for business and Japanese can come in and out, but in terms of tourists or whatever, yes, you are basically only allowed in if you are on a registered sort of escorted tour. And apparently the first few flights that came in, for all the news coverage that, yeah, we're restarting tourism in Japan is normal, just like the other countries, it's not. There aren't that many tours. The first few flights that came into Japan on the day, in fact, I think I saw somebody talking about how in Narita on the first day when tourism resumed, there were no visible guided tours with tour guides and so on. I know for Japanese tourism, particularly like bubble era tourism, it was like 50% or more of Japanese tourism was done with tour guides. So there's an assumption, maybe a mistaken assumption, that most tourism by foreigners involves tour guides and so on. Of course, that's totally not true. Most people don't want to have a guide taking them around to places where they're getting kickbacks and, sort of being forced around on a bus, like they're on a school trip or something like that. That's not how most foreigners I know like to travel. Although, of course, bear in mind that the majority of tourists in Japan. Oh, this is another thing which always gets me. Whenever there's a news story on NHK about tourism, they show like a stock footage of European and Caucasian tourists. I wouldn't say specifically American, but they love Caucasian tourists, like people who sort of stand out and are looking, walking through Akasaka, looking at everything curiously, and they go up to those people. Yet the vast majority of tourists that come to Japan are Chinese, first of all, and Asian, far and away, like from all over Asia, second. Like lots of Taiwanese, lots of Thai, lots of Indonesians. Um, you know, like Europeans for a start are far down the list. But again, it kind of fits a stereotype. The Japanese like to think when they're talking about tourism, they like to think it's, Caucasian people for whatever reason. And as another aside, in chasing another squirrel briefly, there was a news story on local TV in Tokyo the other day about how a local city council had offered a day for Ukrainian refugees to come and visit, to get a guided tour of their zoo. And there was TV footage on NHK of a group of like 20 Ukrainian people walking around some crappy little small town zoo, escorted. And, the city council saying, yes, we really want to help the refugees. And I'm just thinking, did you do this for the Kurds, or did you do this for the Afghans or the Syrians? Like, why are you doing this for the Ukrainians? And the reason is, frankly, is that, and it pains me to say this, but I'm going to say it. The Ukrainians look like what Japanese think tourists are. They look like the rich Germans and the Swiss and the Americans who, back in the Meiji period, that they sent dispatched people to go and teach us about science and the world and help us to modernize. And this is how Japanese have this idealized image of Europeans as being bringing these sort of bringers of knowledge and civilization. I mean, it's embarrassing for a country that was never colonized that they look at Caucasians and Europeans in this way. And so, yeah, so when they want to convey positive tourism, they convey it the same way that colonized countries that when they're being subservient do the same thing. They look for white people, and Ukrainians look like the sort of white people that, frankly, a lot of people in the media idealize, even though economically and in terms of development, Ukraine is very, very much equivalent to other, Myanmar and Syria. They're within comparable ranges anyway. And yet, it shows that it's not, they're economically, it's not economics. It's that they have this weird thing with Caucasians. But coming back to that, so anyway, they have these guided tours, which are not coming to Japan, or at least not visibly. And if they are coming, they're probably coming from Asia rather than, from European countries first. Although theoretically, if you do want to come to Japan as a tourist, you can do it if you sign up for a tour right now. And there'll probably be some people that will do that. But this means that basically you're talking like a very tiny percent of normal tourism. And so Japan is not really reopening because most people don't want to be going around on bus tours. And so the former prime minister said, isn't that a crappy policy? Right now, if we let tourists come in, they're going to come into Japan and they're going to spend a ton of money because everything is on a 30% sale. And Japan is awesome. And he is correct about that in saying that shouldn't we be fast tracking proper reopening to tourists rather than this sort of North Korea, minder-based tourism. And he is correct. I mean, again, Suga is almost like anti-PR. He could screw up selling ice cream. He could he could start throwing it at the kids and saying "screw you." I mean, he was never supposed to be a prime minister. He's never supposed to be someone who sells policy. But yeah, what you've got with the current prime minister is someone with no real policy, but who's very good at selling like thin air. And in Suga, you had a guy who actually, he got so much flack, and I think I gave him a lot of flack myself, but I still would acknowledge that I think his COVID policy and many of his other policies were much better thought out than Abe's, and much better thought out than anything I've seen from Kishida. He was actually a technocrat. He was a policy guy who was just, just terrible at being a prime minister. So I'm with Suga on this. They should be opening up the floodgates. I've conveyed my thoughts on Twitter that I hope that really what's happening with this with these guided tours and these sort of demonstrations in Parliament that, we're being very tough and we're going to make them all wear masks and we're going to watch them and spy on them and make them carry tracking apps and put them with minders. I think this is safety theatre, and I think they're doing it on purpose to avoid criticism for reopening to tourism and sparking xenophobic panic and terror, which I think it would if they open the floodgates all of a sudden. They're going to do this for a couple of months, wait for the noise to calm down, ask NHK to run some positive stories about the tourists are back, which NHK is dutifully doing, and they're mischaracterizing this so it feels like government propaganda watching it on NHK. And once people are like used to the idea of having foreigners back in the country again, and seeing the positives of it, they might then allow a little debate for opening, and they'll probably just turn the dial and increase the number of tourists that come. And I would predict that provided there's no weirdness that happens with COVID, like some new big strain and some new big, sort of wave, I would hope that would be 2 or 3 months away from normal tourism resuming. And you want to be coming in at the moment because seriously, everything in Japan is super cheap right now if you're coming in with foreign currency. So, Japan's getting pummeled on the currency thing. And, everything is not only awesome, but there's hardly any people and it's cheap. So, yeah, you should totally be waiting to come in. And the Japanese government should be accelerating. If they have like a 3 month time, secret timeline to fully reopen, they should be accelerating it to like 1.5 months right now because that's going to be a lot of money coming in that the government doesn't have to hand out or give to anyone. You're just going to have people from China and Vietnam and Thailand and maybe some Caucasians and maybe some non-Caucasians from Western countries. But NHK is just going to focus on the Caucasians, but that's fine because they're all going to bring money and they're going to give it to Japanese people. It's going to be a big economic stimulus. Why are they not opening up the doors? But they'll have to sort out things like the masking and whatnot. So that's an interesting thing to me. Anyway, Quint Rankid, Hiko Simon, is Japan part of the West? Do they see themselves as part of the West? Quint Rankid, Japan definitely sees itself as part of the West. It does not see itself as an Asian country. And I know the way that a lot of you say that to your average chav in Australia, or Australia. What is Australia? Is Australia Asian? But you say it to your average British chav, or sort of they'll say, "What?" They look at Japan, of course, is just by ethnicity and a superficial appearance as being part of Asia, but Japan does not see itself as part of Asia at all. Japan sees itself as naturally a partner of NATO and NATO countries and Five Eyes and Western democracies. The fact that they, and again, people have some really mistaken ideas about Japan and the reason that Japan thinks like this. One, it's stupid just to look at its ethnicity. Japan was a European-style parliamentary democracy with European-style laws in the 19th century. There is this idea that people have that Japan was some kind of samurai warring state that became like a Nazi-style fascist dictatorship that the American-led West modernized and turned into a democracy after World War II. No, Japan was a European-style parliamentary democracy for like since the late 19th century. And the way that it derailed is something that actually Western democratic scholars should study and take more seriously. There were cultural factors to it, but it was interesting how Japan had a parliament based on the sort of UK and Prussian sort of economic, and political models that it was basically came apart and it did cease functioning and it was rebuilt after World War II. But Japan really functioned as a, it was really the first. Japan sees itself as having modernized. One, it resisted imperialism, colonization, and is unique in the world for doing that. But it did so by kind of voluntarily becoming European itself. And then, ironically, and this is again among the many ironies of Japan not being colonized, one, it kind of accepted the mindset of countries that are colonized in many ways in terms of how they looked at Europe. And two, they wanted to become the Europe of Asia. They saw themselves, they again, the whole thing with the League of Nations, the whole thing, going back as far as 1919, and the struck down provision on racial equality that they wanted in the League of Nations Charter. It all came down to they saw themselves as, for example, when China was being carved up among the colonial powers, they weren't really fighting for equality of Asian people with Europeans. They wanted equality for Japan with European powers to be seen the same as a European power, able to claim positions in China the same as European countries. An idea that was so offensive to South Africa and Australia that they forced Britain and the racist states in the US similarly lobbied against this. They forced them to vote against it because the idea of a non-white race nation, majority nation, having equal status with a white race nation would undermine apartheid and white Australia laws. And so Britain shot it down, but Japan basically saw itself as an equal white nation from late 19th century, and certainly after it defeated Russia, it felt like it had earned its place at the table. And Japan, this is where Japan got really pissed off at what happened at the end of World War I, where it didn't get granted the possessions it felt that other European nations that did nothing in Asia, were granted. So, yeah, great question there, Quint Rankid. And Japan has historically long seen itself as part of the West and has been really pissed off at not being treated as part of the West when it sees itself that way. So, that's a deep one. And is it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, the West itself is kind of a stupid club, right? And I mean, what about South Korea? What about other developed? I think the OECD is a good way, and that's not a closed club. I think it's an outdated concept, Western nations, but it still is something that a lot of people include and a lot of nations do identify with, and I think the Japanese still do, even though the same problem now as in 1919. A lot of people in the Western nation club still have trouble identifying Japan as a member of that club, even though Japan really wants to be in it. Yeah, Ilyasi Chaji says Japan is the west of the east. Yeah, that's very much it. Dan H, we Kurds and also some of the Pashtun look like Europeans as well. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Kurds, Syrians, a lot of Syrians. Hey, Steve Jobs, Syrian. Yeah, they honestly, when you see street scenes from like Turkey or Syria or whatever, or even Iraq, they look European. Yeah, so exactly, it's crazy to me. We Kurds and also some Pashtun. By the way, I didn't know you were Kurdish, but that's super cool. Look like Europeans as well. I don't know why people didn't do the same for Armenians since they fit as well. Yeah, following the USA lead. Yeah, yeah. Like I say, it is weird to me, and it is absurd. The lines around race that people draw. I mean, right. Well, we'll come to this. Actually, I didn't think I was going to go over time today, but I am. We have two topics left. The first one is how Tokyo has changed over 5 years and over the last 2 years. Hand sanitizer is everywhere. Yes, it is. You can't go in or out of a shop or a place without hand sanitizing on the way in and on the way out. I've gotten used to that. That is true. Two, you can get takeout from pretty much anywhere now. Hallelujah. That was something you couldn't do before, and it's something you can do now, and I hope stays. That is awesome. And Uber Eats has also gotten great. QR codes to order food. I haven't seen that so much, although the QR codes like PayPay to pay for food has definitely spread, and I am now using that myself, which I didn't do before. The land of point cards has become the land of point apps. Yes, indeed, that is. I don't know if that's certainly. I hate having all these things on my wallet, and I do prefer having apps. But there again, I installed like apps for my nearby like chemist and stuff like that, and I hardly use it. Even with the app, it's a hassle, but at least it's not overflowing from my wallet, so that's good. Gates on train platforms. Well, I guess that's something that was happening regardless of the pandemic. They were trying to build this basically for safety and for stopping people jumping off the platforms. And that's a good thing. But yes, I guess those are things that have changed in the last 2 years in Tokyo. Those are fair observations. Final story is an interesting one. Oh, no, there's two. In fact, where is it? There was another story I had in here which I wanted to talk about. Sometimes this happens. It doesn't. Oh, it's over here. Unseen Japan, actually, they did an interesting apology where they did a feature on Okinawan food, describing it as a type of Japanese food, to which somebody who, you do get people who are sort of activist or appear to be quite activist. I don't know if they're only Twitter or they appear to be more active than just on Twitter. Where an activist called out saying, no, don't call Okinawan food Japanese food. It's totally different. And saying it's kind of offensive to call, and it's funny they say Luchu and Okinawan food slash. And yeah, the account is interesting, and I'm not gonna. It's wrong to judge by the account, but it is good to get an idea of where they're coming from. And this person identifies as an American slash Okinawan, so I'm guessing American citizen of Okinawan heritage. But I don't know. I mean, could be either way. But what is interesting about the account is that the account is going through in a long way talking about one being very anti, probably based on the U.S. bases in Okinawa being very anti-U.S. military, and very much seeing it as imperialist and being quite pro-China, which is interesting because within Okinawa there are frequent polls on how Okinawans feel, and while Okinawans do indeed feel screwed over by the bases and they feel like they're still second class within Japan and treated worse, and they do feel that their culture is not appreciated sufficiently as being distinct from the rest of Japan, which it unquestionably is. It's not just a dialect, it's pretty much a full different language down there and full separate history and culture. I mean, effectively is a separate country that was integrated into Japan. So all of those things are sort of valid, but yeah, this particular account that was calling it out actually seems kind of pro-China. And very few people in these polls in China, in Okinawa, for a start, there was a debate: should Okinawa be independent, or should it return to Japan, or should it stick with the U.S.? And it was in 1972, and it is now overwhelmingly, everybody's no matter how much how dissatisfied people are with the Japanese government and how nothing's changed in terms of the U.S. bases and everything. Basically, most people in Okinawa clearly now identify as Japanese, and the support for independence is almost zero. Almost, it's like less than 1%. And it's similar. No one wants to go back to America. So, but there again, there are people with legitimate Okinawan identity and heritage who, particularly people who probably there was a lot of immigration from in the 19th century around the time that Okinawa was integrated into Japan, where Okinawa was a vassal state of China. It paid tribute to China, and Japan had restrictions on how it could interact with Okinawa. So there are people, if probably from that time, might have identified more closely with China than Japan uh, and identified more for a distinct Okinawan tradition. And maybe there are families of people who have that tradition who see Okinawan as not being Japanese at all. But Okinawans in Okinawa now are Japanese. Now, they're a distinct ethnic group, and they're a distinct culture, and their food is a distinct food culture. But identity politics, what do you do? You can't really do anything because, of course, with identity, if you say one thing, no matter how you phrase it, you're always going to offend a bunch of people. That's pretty much the problem. You can say Okinawan food is Japanese food, and you're going to offend people who, feel like, no, it's not Japanese food. But there again, if you say that Okinawan food is not Japanese food, then you're also going to offend clearly a large amount of people because, treating them, they complain enough about being treated as second-class Japanese citizens, yet denying them equality with Japanese. It could be interpreted the other way, So in the end of the day, trying to speak for other people and what their identity is, you're always going to upset and offend somebody, which isn't a reason not to do it. But I guess it's a reminder that Unseen Japan is taking here to sort of be sensitive to how people might take the way that you're writing it. They're taking down the whole article. I think that the solution for that is that you don't. There's no point trying to classify it as Japanese. You just say it's just Okinawan food, and people can interpret that as being free and independent Okinawa. It can be Chinese Okinawa, Luchu. It can be, or it can be Japanese Okinawa. However, people want to take it. Yeah, doing that for people and categorizing it is what offended them. I respect actually Unseen Japan trying so hard to listen and be considerate to something which I think is impossible. I think you're always going to offend somebody. I would give up. But they don't, and I give them credit for not giving up and for still trying to be as sensitive as possible. But yeah, I thought, wow. It's like it's same with Ainu, right? There are Ainu people in Japan and separate ethnicity, separate culture, separate food, separate language, and it's part of Japan. It's like Welsh, language in the UK. Some might say that Welsh are not British, but they are from the British Isles, and some might be offended. Either way that you say it, they might be offended. But I think it's good that for Japan to, so long as Japanese can use the term Japanese, embracing the diversity within Japan, which many Japanese don't. Many Japanese are completely ignorant of the diversity within Japan. When they express Japanese pride, they express it literally an ethnic Japanese pride. And that's where this becomes problematic. But I feel like that's something that's a lot less of a thing than it was in the past. I think nowadays there's enough information that people are a little bit better informed on that. Final story, we are 6 minutes over, is an article on Nikkei talking about how low IT pay stifles Japan's digital transformation, which is kind of true, but I feel like it's kind of still missing out. Nikkei, it's interesting how, yes, Japan pays its engineers and its IT engineers less than other countries, although they still earn better than the average wage, but the difference to the average wage is still less in Japan. I don't think pay is really the problem, though. There is a problem with how just IT is seen generally in Japan as as sort of, they're not really respected for their skills. I think that was true of traditional IT. I think for new digital transformation IT, there is slightly more value and they do pay them more money. But then you've got another problem that, one, you've got to use them for what you're paying them to do. And when Japanese companies are so slow about making decisions as fundamental as, the technology basis that they're going to operate on, they take a lot of time. I worked at an IT consulting company until about 6 years ago now, which was, the whole world had said, we're going to stop doing basic enterprise resource planning system, ERP migrations, globally, because the work is commodified. Everyone, all around the world has pretty much done their migrations from their old-fashioned mainframes to their on-premises server-based ERP systems. So, we're just going to outsource all of that work to our Indian subsidiaries, and don't sell that. Now we're going to sell more high value digital transformation. And the Japan subsidiary that I was at raised its hand and said, no, in Japan, we're still making a ton of money because companies are still only making decisions today to move from mainframes to what now are outdated legacy ERP system implementations. But that's how slow Japan is. And it means that there still is a lot of money in, frankly, what's outdated IT work. It just takes so long. Companies are so slow to make decisions, and Japan is a huge economy. There's a lot of the work to go around, and so I think that digital pay is certainly part of it. That IT is considered crappy work in Japan, and you're not going to attract talent. But look, people are still. I think people know, particularly for digital work, that they will get better salary, and they are attracting people to go and get trained in it. So, I don't think and also remember the reason that people get paid so well in the US is that they have to live in tech towns. They have to live in San Francisco or Seattle or places like that where real estate's crazy. I mean, just to afford a room in a house, you've got to earn $500,000 a year practically. So Japan doesn't quite have those things as well. So yeah, I think appreciating talent in general is something that Japan needs to do more on. But I think the real problems with Japan digital transformation, it's not how much you're paying the data engineers. It's that's a small part of it, but the bigger part of it is Japanese companies are just too sort of risk averse and too conservative and too slow to make the actual decisions to use those to actually do the things that require those people. And it's something that's part of my daily life now, and it's something that frustrates me, but it's the nature of the beast. It's something that I hope will change. That is all the topics that I had for tonight. Yeah, Cobras Tenshi, the gates of the platforms have been installed in a lot of places. Oh yes, the gates on the platforms with high rates of people jump. The gates of the platforms have been installed a lot of places, especially those with the high rates of jumping, since 2015. So not really a last 2 years thing. Well, I think it's been slowly happening more and more. So I think you're right. It's been around for more than that, but there's probably been a sharper increase in the last couple of years, perhaps. And yes, but maybe due to the pandemic. Well, yeah, I don't think it's actually depression that's driven it per se. I think it's just, again, it's exactly the same with IT transformation. They make a plan to start doing it 6 years from now. They're very slow to get things done. They'll do it very methodically and well, and probably by next year, every train station will have them. But it's just taken a long time to get going. Very late boom from Finland, who was in Tokyo, indeed, Yoni. Which reminds me, I owe you a message back, and I will get back to you, Yoni. But welcome, good to see that you're in Tokyo, and welcome. Chris Rushton, also good to see you. Even big Japanese companies are turning to creating small subsidiary companies to do their IT because they need to pay them a lot more. That's an excellent point, Chris Rushton. Actually, they do it for a number of reasons. There are lots of accounting and tax reasons as well that they create IT subsidiaries, but certainly the different pay scales are now, that's more novel and more recent, but that is also no doubt driving indeed the spinning out of those companies. So that is an excellent point. The east of the west or the west of the east? But yes, I can't read. I'm not going to go back through that. Oh, I see. So you're talking about Poland now. Okay, I will not go back through all of those comments, but I'm going to wrap up. It's late. So again, apologies. I will be in Singapore next week, or I will actually be flying to Singapore this time next week. So I'm going to have a week off next week. I will be back the week after next. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. Remember to like if you like the video. Also, if you didn't like the video, please like the video. Thank you for commenting and keeping me company as you do every week. And take it easy, stay safe, and boom, peace. Have a good week, everyone. Shubhas, good to see you. Glad that you made it. Enjoy the coffee and yeah, watch it at your leisure. I'll talk to you all later. See ya.